The videos were commissioned, not stumbled upon, not distributed through a random dark web exchange. Commissioned, specifically requested, specifically funded, specifically directed by a woman in Illinois who paid thousands of dollars to individuals overseas to produce content depicting the deliberate cruelty to baby monkeys. Amanda Furaz, 31, of Crest Hill, Illinois, did not accidentally encounter this material. She sought it. She paid for it. She participated in online groups specifically organized around the commission and consumption of this content, groups whose participants paid producers to create specific scenarios with specific animals using specific methods. ICE's Homeland Security Investigations opened the case through its Cyber Crimes Unit, the same unit that investigates child exploitation material, financial crimes, and any category of criminal content that moves through digital infrastructure. The commission of animal torture videos for online consumption falls under federal obscenity statutes and, depending on the content and the method of interstate transfer, under multiple additional federal provisions. Furaz pleaded guilty in April 2026. The specific charges: conspiracy and interstate commerce violations related to the commission and distribution of animal cruelty content. Her sentencing was pending as of the most recent available public filing. The investigation focused on the financial transactions, the payments Furaz made to overseas producers, and the digital communication records that documented her participation in the online groups where the content was commissioned and distributed. What's your read? When someone pays overseas producers to create animal cruelty content, does prosecution under federal obscenity and animal cruelty statutes represent the appropriate legal framework? Or should there be a specific federal statute that addresses this category more directly? Type A if existing statutes are sufficient. Type B if specific legislation is needed. Drop it in the comments. The online community structure that enabled Furaz's conduct, the groups organized specifically around the commission and consumption of this category of content, is the investigative focus beyond any single prosecution. HSI's Cyber Crimes Unit, in cases like this, treats the individual prosecution as one thread in a broader mapping of the network. Who else participated? Who produced the content? Who else commissioned it? What financial infrastructure supported the transactions? The overseas producers who received Furaz's payments are subjects of the international component of the investigation. Whether they face prosecution depends on the jurisdictions in which they operate and the extradition relationships available to the United States. Some will face charges, others will not. Subscribe and hit the notification bell, because the network that HSI mapped through the Furaz investigation and the other participants identified through the same financial and communication records is the element of this case that extends beyond a single guilty plea. The federal sentencing guidelines for Furaz's specific charges have not been applied yet. The sentencing date was not public in available records. The specific prison term she will receive depends on the sentencing judge's assessment of the specific conduct, the guidelines calculation, and any factors presented in the sentencing memorandums. You've seen how HSI cyber crimes units trace financial payments through online cruelty networks. What's your response to the fact that this category of content is commissioned, funded, and distributed globally through the same digital infrastructure as legitimate commerce? Comment below. Was this justice, a federal prosecution and guilty plea for a woman who paid for the commission of animal cruelty content? Or does the pending sentencing represent the moment accountability becomes concrete for conduct that the investigation documented in specific financial and digital detail? Drop your verdict in the comments. One detail: the specific word the ICE press release used to describe Furaz's participation, not consumer, commissioner. The distinction the federal prosecution draws between someone who viewed this content and someone who paid for its creation is the specific legal and moral line that the charges address. She did not passively receive it. She actively funded its production. That is the detail the federal charges are built around. The federal investigation into the network that Amanda Furaz participated in extended beyond her individual case. HSI's Cyber Crimes Unit, in prosecuting the Commissioner of Animal Cruelty Content, treats each case as a node in a broader network map, because the people paying for this content and the people producing it are connected through the same digital infrastructure that governs every other category of online commission. Financial transaction records. The payments Furaz made to overseas producers through platforms, through digital payment systems, through the transaction architecture of online commerce, created the evidentiary trail that HSI's financial investigators followed. The overseas producers received money through traceable channels. The traceable channels connected them to the commissioning accounts. The commissioning accounts connected them to Furaz. The online communities where this content was commissioned and shared are the investigative focus that extends beyond any single prosecution. HSI's cybercrimes unit, in cases like this, works to identify the full participant base, not just the commissioner in Illinois, but the others who were paying, requesting, and sharing the same category of content through the same network. Some of those participants are in the United States, subject to federal prosecution. Some are overseas, subject to international law enforcement cooperation requests that may or may not produce extradition or foreign prosecution. Some are in jurisdictions where the specific conduct is not criminalized under local law. The map is never complete, and the accountability is never total. Furaz's case is the American accountability, the specific individual in Crest Hill, Illinois, who paid for the commission of this content from her home through her devices using her financial accounts. The investigation found her. The guilty plea acknowledged what she did. The broader network that her participation connected her to is the subject of ongoing investigation that the public record does not fully reflect. The sentencing, when it comes, will produce a specific number of months or years. That number will be determined by the federal guidelines, the specific nature of the charges, and the judge's assessment of the conduct and any mitigating factors the defense presents. What the sentencing cannot determine is the scale of the problem. The number of people paying for the commission of this category of content from the United States to overseas producers is not something any single case can measure. It is something HSI's continuing investigation attempts to address, case by case, prosecution by prosecution. Furaz is one case. The network is larger. The digital infrastructure that enables it is the same infrastructure that enables every category of online commerce, indistinguishable at the transaction level from legitimate purchases until the content being commissioned is examined. HSI examines the content, it follows the money, it builds the case, and it produces guilty pleas like the one Furaz entered in April 2026. Was this justice, a guilty plea and pending sentencing for a woman who paid for the commission of this category of content? Or does the specific financial and digital trail that convicted Furaz represent only the fraction of similar conduct that investigative resources and technical capability allow the federal system to reach? Drop your verdict in the comments. The detail that defines this case is not the content itself, which will not be described here and should not be. It is the commission, the deliberate, funded, directed creation of cruelty for consumption. The person in Illinois who sent money to overseas producers and specified what she wanted produced. That is the specific criminal act that the federal charges address. The guilty plea confirms it. The sentencing will quantify it. What's the detail that stays with you? The commission model, paying to direct specific content rather than passively consuming it. The HSI cyber crimes investigation methodology that followed financial transactions to the commissioner. The pending sentencing that will determine what federal law says this specific conduct costs. Or the network that HSI mapped through Furaz's case and continues to investigate. Let's discuss it in the comments. And if there's a federal case you want us to investigate next, leave it below. The specific federal statutes under which Furaz was charged, conspiracy and interstate commerce violations related to animal cruelty content, reflect the legal framework available to federal prosecutors when the conduct involves cross-border financial transactions and digital distribution. The 2010 Animal Crush Video Prohibition Act specifically criminalized the creation, sale, distribution, and possession with intent to sell or distribute obscene animal cruelty videos. A statute passed after the Supreme Court struck down a broader animal cruelty statute in 2010's United States v. Stevens. That legislative history matters for understanding why this case was prosecuted federally rather than under state animal cruelty statutes. The federal statute specifically addresses the commercial production and distribution model that characterizes these networks, the payment for commission structure that Furaz participated in. State animal cruelty statutes address the physical harm to animals. The federal statute addresses the economic infrastructure that funds and incentivizes that harm. Furaz was in Illinois. The producers were overseas. The content moved through digital channels. The payments moved through financial systems that cross state and international lines. The federal statute's interstate commerce element was satisfied by the transaction architecture alone, regardless of where the actual content was produced. This is the specific legal structure that makes federal prosecution available for a woman in Crest Hill who never left the country and never directly harmed any animal. She funded the harm. She directed the harm. She participated in the network that organized and executed the harm for payment. The federal statute reaches that conduct. The sentencing guidelines for violations of the Animal Crush Video Prohibition Act are calibrated to the specific nature of the content and the role of the defendant in the production and distribution chain. A commissioner, someone who paid for the creation of specific content, occupies a different position in that calculation than a passive consumer, but a less severe position than a producer. The sentencing judge will apply those guidelines to Furaz's specific conduct. Hedi HCI's announcement of the guilty plea emphasized the ongoing investigation, the explicit signal that this case is not isolated, that the network Furaz participated in is being mapped, and that additional prosecutions will follow from the same investigation or connected investigations. That signal is deliberate. It is intended to reach the other participants in the same networks who have not yet been charged, to communicate that the investigation is not over and that the specific conduct Furaz engaged in is being addressed systematically, not just in individual cases. Whether the signal reaches those participants and whether it changes their behavior is the specific deterrence question that no single prosecution can answer. What's the detail about this case and this network that you want to understand better? The financial investigation methodology? The international coordination with overseas producers' jurisdictions? The scope of the broader network HSI mapped through Furaz's case? Or the sentencing guidelines framework that distinguishes commissioners from consumers and from producers in determining accountability? Let's discuss it below. The federal case that produced this prosecution is now part of the permanent public record. The specific conduct, documented, admitted, adjudicated, is available to anyone who wants to understand what this category of crime looks like from the inside. The investigation methodology, the charging decision, the evidence assembled, all of it in the public record. Federal cases like this one are built slowly and specifically. The investigators who work them spend months reconstructing timelines from digital and financial records that most subjects believe have been adequately concealed or are too voluminous to trace. They are wrong about both assumptions. The records persist. The volume doesn't defeat trained forensic analysts. And the specific legal framework that governs each category of conduct, the federal statutes, the sentencing guidelines, the jurisdictional authority, is designed to reach conduct that might seem, from the outside, to exist in a gap where accountability doesn't apply. It applies. Every case in the public record says so. Every sentencing date and every guilty plea says so. The notification bell is the only way to make sure you're there when the next case drops. Subscribe and stay in the loop, because this investigation is one of many that the Bureau runs simultaneously, and what we find next may be even closer to home.